What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Spencer, doing something a little different today, obviously, and that's because I'm going to be looking at the manga and the anime. So, not talking about the TCG, because I, like a lot of people who play this game, started out by watching the show and the 4Kids version, which is not controversial, but obviously they changed a lot of things about it. But I am going to compare it to that original version because that's what we watched. And what I wanted to do today was look at how different is the original manga from season one. So I think everybody at this point knows that there's a secret season 0 that nobody talks about in the show. It's really dark, right? Where Yugi plays a bunch of shadow games, but it is not about trading cards. It's about a whole bunch of different things. And maybe that's something I'll explore in a different video. But I wanted to do a 1-for-1, like how different, like once these cards are introduced that you'll see here, like on this screen, what are the differences? And we'll go kind of scene by scene, I guess, or because things generally happen the same way. But I'm going to actually break it down, and we'll look at the manga scenes, and then we'll just show some of the anime clips. So we'll go ahead and get started here. So the first thing you'll notice here is that in the anime, Yugi and Joey are dueling, and Joey's just learning about the game. He just kind of understands it. He doesn't know that Yugi's grandpa has a card shop. Well, in the anime, or in the manga, I should say, you can see here, he's like, it's called Duel Monsters. So they kind of all learn about it at the same time. They're also at his card shop. So, and then Yugi's like, I think it'll be popular in Japan too, versus in the anime where it's already really popular. All the kids are playing it apparently at recess time. So that's the first big difference, I guess. Not that it's the biggest deal in the world, right?
Hey, Tristan, Yugi here's teaching me how to play Duel Monsters.
Dueling monsters?
Duel Monsters, you Nimrod.
All right, so this scene kind of plays out pretty similar when it comes to him showing the Blue Eyes card, although there is like one important difference. Well, not important, but I think it's a pretty cool nuance where he says there's only 4 copies, or it says a few here. But the difference is, like in the show, he's just like, it's very rare. But in this, it said they stopped making them because they're so powerful. So
The Blue Eyes White Dragon, so rare, so powerful, I never let it leave my hands.
I think that's the only difference I can think of when it comes to this, and that he's not for trade, and that he won it off a buddy. I think that was in the anime as well, or at least some version of it. For some reason in my mind, I also kind of remember that, or maybe it was mentioned like way later down the show, but in the manga it says, hey, yeah, I won this from a buddy. Super valuable. Not really. It's just like a really important item to me. And then the artwork obviously looks really cool here. So the manga looks really, really great, obviously. But yeah. So this part's actually pretty interesting too, because that first scene I showed you guys, that first panel, that is the first look of Duel Monsters, like in the entire manga at this point. So like in the anime, Kaiba over here is like, oh, there's a really powerful card, and he's like, is it the Blue Eyes White Dragon? He's not sure. But in this case, he just kind of walks in, but we do get the cool scene where he's like, he doesn't say it exactly like that, but he's like, let me see your deck, Joey. And he's like, yeah, this sucks. And Joey gets super offended. So I thought that was pretty funny, a pretty good detail that they were able to keep into the show. But yeah, that's a pretty cool note. And there's also one big difference, which I'll show you guys here in just a second.
Me? Duel you? I would have more of a challenge playing solitaire.
What?
So yeah, here is the big difference, right? He looks at the Blue Eyes card, which is out, like from that last scene. In the show, he's collected all 3 of them, as you probably know from later in the episode. When he rips it in half, right? He's like, I got that last. I already have all 3. I just didn't want it to be used against me. But here he's like, oh, snap. Blue Eyes, this card is nuts. He's like, if I had this card, I would be unbeatable. So he owns no copies of this right now, which is a really big difference because, as you'll see here in a second, the first episode, like at this, like once this gets down, everything starts to hit the fan in terms of like how different they are. And I'll talk about even like more, but like the actual plot points of how like Exodia comes out, yeah, that's when things get a little wild. I do feel like it is noting that not everything is different. So even though the order of the scenes is a little like out of order, I guess, between the two, there is a lot of like remade scenes. So even though like that just happened where they looked at the Blue Eyes card, now we're going to the classroom scene where Yugi is playing Joey, and then this is kind of the rules, which is pretty cool too. It kind of tells you, even though like I think the rules basically kept getting different and different as time went on. But I also think it's kind of neat that a Shonen Jump anime like actually had like a real card game like developed within it, and that's what makes the show so cool. Anyways, is that you can actually play the cards in real life, but I just feel like in the anime, you don't really see this too often. And to this point, like I said, they've only been playing random shadow games. I mean, anything you can imagine. And one of them, there's like a scorpion in a shoe. But in this case, it's like, here's how you play Duel Monsters, the game. And I think in this one, you actually get to attack directly, which is pretty funny because Duelist Kingdom, like, that's part of the rules that you can't. I don't know if that's also going to be altered in the manga. I haven't really gotten that far for the purpose of this episode. But as you can see here, yep, here are the Duel Monster episodes.
See, each card has an attack number and a defense number. First player to eliminate their opponent's life points wins the duel.
Pretty good move, huh, Yugi?
Again, I just wanted to quickly say when it comes to the attention to detail, I thought this was really cool. So in the anime, he doesn't say what the card is explicitly, and the art isn't exactly the same, but it's the same card. It's Dark Dragon with 1500 attack and 800 defense. I don't know if that makes a difference to you guys, but I thought that was actually pretty awesome. So awesome, cool for them in the anime in episode 1 for recreating the scene pretty much exactly for how it is, because he also says, like, I don't have strong enough cards, I lose. That was pretty neat, so I thought that was awesome.
Pretty good move, but not good enough.
What? Thanks a lot. A card that powerful totally wipes me out.
Like I said, at some point things start to go off the rails in terms of comparing the two of them. So the order of events have already changed, where Kaiba already knows about the Blue Eyes White Dragon. He's not overhearing at this point, so he just watched that duel from episode 1, or I guess in the manga here, in this case 2, which I think is like issue 8. And he's like, hey, did you bring that Blue Eyes to school? Which, okay, wow, that's way different. And he's like, yeah, it is. And what do you think Kaiba does? Well, we'll take a look here at the next scene, and I'm sure it will not surprise you. I said this wouldn't surprise you, but in a way it is. Like, I would say in the first episode of the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, Kaiba's very cocky. You know, he owns a business, obviously. That's what people know him for. There's no mention of that here in this issue of the manga, this introduction to Kaiba at all. But yeah, he tries to replace it with a fake card, and so that he can take this one copy of Blue Eyes, so he has his first copy, because he thinks it'll make him unbeatable. Versus, again, in the anime, he thought he already had all 3 copies. He's just trying to get rid of the last one. So he tries to pull a sneaky there on Yugi, being more of a sleuth than a kind of a cocky SOB, if that makes sense. So Yugi obviously realizes that this is a fake card, like anybody who plays the game of Yu-Gi-Oh would. No one's just been able to figure out the formula, which is probably a good thing. But in any case, he's like, dude, please give me back this card. Like, don't be silly. I know it's fake. And he's like, dude, no, for real. He's like, Kaiba, like, come on, bro. And then what does Kaiba do? He just smacks him over the head with a suitcase. It's like, whoa. It's like, come on, dude. You're going to steal, like, I don't know. I guess at that point, if you're stealing someone's really important card, you don't really care about anyone's feelings, knowing very well that that card means a lot to his grandpa. Which I guess at this point in episode 1 does fall in line with Kaiba from both kind of universes, whatever you want to call it. But I thought this was pretty funny that Kaiba's just like, screw it, I'm just going to hit you with the suitcase. All right, so yeah, like after that confrontation, Yugi, turns into a Tem, and he's like, yo, like, we got beef. Let's hit a shadow game up. And he's like, yo, like Kaiba's like freaking out. He has not developed any technology yet. Like, Yu-Gi-Oh is still in its very infant stages. People are just playing the card game at this point that Pegasus is creating. So the first duel, Yugi is not using his grandpa's deck. He's playing his own Yu-Gi-Oh deck, which I think is really awesome. And the cards like materialize, and that's kind of like what the whole like manga was about, like from this point. And I bet, like, if you were reading this, like, as it was coming out, you'd probably think this is a one-off episode, because all of them are like this. They all play this very unique shadow game. Now, this one is definitely the craziest, and this artwork, by the way, is absolutely nuts. I think it's amazing. But yeah, so this is, like, the hugest lineage. Their first confrontation is not after, like, Grandpa is taken, and he has those Blue Eyes cards. So, like, I'll go along, and I'll show you guys what happens. But yeah, like, this is it. Like, this is where the manga really starts to delineate. Is that the word? Delineate? I don't know, but this is where things start to change. It is worth noting too, by the way, and I just kind of talked about this, but to clarify a little bit more, all these games have all been shadow games technically, or at least that's what they've been called so far. And this is just another one of those. But in each one, like, Yugi sends them to the shadow realm, like, after they lose. So like I just said, again, I think if you were reading this, you would just think this is another episode, because this is how all of them start. There's a conflict, like, during it. They're very episodic. There's no series of this anime so far. It's every week Yugi has a new foe that he plays a new shadow game with, and then he sends him to the shadow realm. So this is no different. And Kaiba's just like, yo, this is nuts. But yeah, sure, he's like insane, and he wants to do it, as you can see here. So I thought that was pretty neat. Because shadow games I don't think are mentioned until pretty far into the first season, which is another big difference. So, like, as they're playing the shadow game, I think this is a scene worth noting, because this is a pretty stark difference, and I think it kind of makes more sense. Like by the end, like at the end of the first episode, he crushes his mind, right? And he tells him like he's going to learn about the heart of the cards. But it doesn't really resonate too much with me because like he's playing like pretty sound Yu-Gi-Oh. He's playing the best cards. And I know that's kind of like the theme of it. It's like, no, like you can win with any cards as long as you like believe in them, like that kind of thing. But in this case, he like, really cheats. Like he really needs to like cleanse his mind when it comes to this, which is really what happens at the end of this duel. Because he pulls out of his back pocket, Grant. Like he didn't even put it in his deck. He straight up just pulls it out of his pocket to play the card, which is pretty cool. And also this next scene I think is really awesome as well, which I'll show you guys right now. So hopefully this scene kind of exemplifies that a little bit better. He tries to summon out Blue Eyes White Dragon, and it like, literally won't attack for him. So it's actually a lot closer, I think, to like a real Shadow game as kind of the way the show like does it instead of like when it actually forms into like a real TCG. Which I think is awesome. So it won't listen to him, and he says because your heart's not in it again, which I think is a better example of like the mind crush at the end of this versus anything else. Because he's like, yo, what? Like I thought they were just cards. I thought you could just use the most powerful cards and win. And Yugi's like, nah, it ain't really like that. That's not how like the real game is supposed to be played. Which I think is really awesome. And you would think like this is like the end of it. You like I said, you think probably he's going to use Exodia, but no, like this is a whole separate thing that happens. There is still another duel between them, but this is the first in the manga. I won't show you the full duel because you should actually read this because I think the manga is really awesome. Actually, I'm sure Yu-Gi-Oh! Duels is fine as well. Like it kind of starts at the first episode. They're kind of like way more aligned. Although the biggest difference, so like there are like the two mangas, right? This is the original, and then they like kind of remade it to more align with the show. But in duels, they don't actually show the Exodia duel. Like this, obviously, I can understand why it was excluded because he sends them like into a card, and then he has to like live with these monsters and stuff. It's pretty nuts. So that's obviously like a pretty like dark theme, something that probably wouldn't put in the manga. But they do not show that Exodia duel. You kind of just start right in the middle of it. Like issue 2 of duels is like when Pegasus gives him that videotape, and he mentions that he beat Kaiba, and that's all there is to it. But yeah, this was the conclusion of their first duel. He doesn't have blue eyes. Yugi gets it back, and then that's where they go from there. So, again, I just want to get caught up here, because after this, you kind of do get caught up. I'll explain some of the differences that happen in between, but then some of the events actually start to line up, like, once again. So, when I say that the events, like, line up, I use the term very loosely. So, as you can see here, this way? Yeah, this way, maybe. This way. You can see that he says this is the final stage. So that's obviously pretty different because in the show, they just like straight up kidnap him. It kind of like that the kidnapping part is pretty similar, but what happens in the manga is absolutely nuts. So Duel Monsters is not involved for a long, long time again in the anime. Basically, Kaiba sets up this Superdome, which is it's very different because in the end of the first episode, they're in an empty like stadium or whatever you want to call it. But in this, it's like a mega festival. And Yugi has to go through like laser tag. He has to play Mokuba and a different kind of weird game. But let's just say for all intents and purposes, we're kind of trying to get back towards like what happens. So here we go. Yugi is facing off against Kaiba in this final thing, and it is Duel Monsters. So this probably goes a little bit more of how you would expect it to. Yeah, like I said, I just wanted to showcase this just for a second. But, you know, in the anime, empty. Here, there's literally thousands of people watching them. Also, it's not on that big kind of duel thing.
I designed this virtual stadium myself. Impressive, I think you'll agree. It adds a bit more life to the game.
It's not like that. Although this is pretty cool too because he kind of gets the inspiration for the entire like designing this thing from that first duel. And in the show, he's just kind of like, yeah, I figured this out. I kind of did it, which is like kind of doesn't make sense. Although I mean, maybe kinda. I can kind of understand that, but in the manga, you know, he's like, yo, I kind of remember those cards blowing up and like being real, so why don't I make that? But this, they're like playing across from each other, like on just like a wooden table, which is a silly little difference there. But other than those major differences, the duel actually plays out pretty much exactly the same, even to the Dark Knight Gaia, to Swords Revealing Light, draw your last pathetic card, Yugi. All the favorite scenes, you know, basically play out, and this one's almost like a one-for-one recreation actually from the show, which is awesome. And again, I think the artwork here is just So cool. The bold lines, the way that Blue Eyes looks, leading up to, of course, everybody's, or I shouldn't say everybody's, my favorite moment in Yu-Gi-Oh, which is this.
Draw your last pathetic card so I can end this, Yugi.
My grandpa's deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba. But it does contain the unstoppable Exodia.
This scene, of course, I'm talking about is the summoning of Exodia. This scene here is what I got my tattoo up based off of. I'll show a picture of it. It'll probably cover my face right now or my body, and you can kind of see just how similar they are. And this scene, the way it's delivered in the original dub, I think is significantly better than the sub as well. I think there's a few scenes that differ between like which ones I like more, but the way that, you know, Kaiba has this weird voice, oh, impossible.
Ah, impossible!
To the way that, you know, Yugi's like, my deck has no pathetic cards, Kaiba. Like, it's all just so cool. And I love this scene too, especially in the manga, like probably even more than the anime, like at least the way it's portrayed, because you get to see everything in this scene. It's awesome. Like Kaiba's just totally stunned. He's got these giant, powerful monsters all around him. And like, you know, Exodia is just like popping off the screen. It's all amazing. So yes, there were quite a lot of differences, as you guys saw there, between the manga and the anime. It does kind of come together. There's a lot of weird stuff that happens in between, but I would say at the end of the day, the manga ends up lining with it. So that was the exploration for this video. Do you guys like this kind of content? You want to see like Season 0 content? You want to see that weird kind of stadium thing that Yuki had to go to even to get to this point? Let me know in the comment section down below. Other than that, that's going to do it for today's video, and I'll see you guys next time.